Do you know what separates a failed business exit from a highly profitable one? Do you want to maximize the value of your business? The Business Exit Stories podcast is the solution. Through a collection of stories told by the business intermediaries who facilitate those transactions, you'll receive the key takeaways from successful and, yes, some not so successful business exits. Now is the time to begin to position your business for an exit by implementing key strategies designed to maximize your enterprise value and help you achieve an exceptionally profitable exit.
Today we have with us Gerald, an M&A advisor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, sharing some of the truly unique stories with us that he has had in the last several years. On the podcast, we have discussed some of the concepts we'll chat about today, but in our past episodes, they have never been like the extremes that we're going to be talking about today. You really need to listen to these to see what can happen. For example, in the first story that Gerald shares is about a highly profitable business services company that has 5 highly qualified partners in the business handling all of the key functions of the company. These partners are committed to the business. They work 70 to 80 hours a week on the business and have done for years. One partner is the CEO, another the CFO, yet another the COO. The sales and marketing were handled by a partner, as was the IT department. Yet, even though this company was highly profitable, it turned out to be unsaleable. Why, you ask? Listen in and learn why. Next, we have a $35 million tortilla company with millions in profits that couldn't be sold. Yet, another example of critical strategic errors and mistakes that the entrepreneur made that made it literally impossible for this business to be sold. Every entrepreneur needs to learn from transactional stories like this so that you don't make the same mistakes these entrepreneurs did. You need to pay particularly close attention to several of these stories in this episode. Then we have a transaction where the wrong attorney nearly crashed the deal, and only when the attorney was fired did the deal close. To wrap things up, Gerald shares how not having the right advisor on your team that can position the company to properly generate 10 offers. And when you have competition like this, the deal heats up, causing the offering price to escalate and the terms of the deal to get better for the seller. You'll learn when you have multiple offers, your position in negotiating is enhanced as the profit and deal terms can get better and better, and what you need to do to create this type of situation. This is Marvin L. Storm with the Business Exit Stories podcast. Today we're here with Gerald. Gerald, would you take a few minutes and talk a little bit about your company, where you're located, and maybe just a brief mention on your background? And then we're going to dive right in and talk a little bit about some of the transactions you've been involved in over your career, which I guess spans several decades. And I'm sure that the stories you're going to share today will have a lot of relevance for those that are listening in as they think about positioning their companies for an eventual successful and profitable exit. So, Gerald, talk a little bit about who you are and where you're located.
About transferring a business of ongoing concern. Assets is not what makes a company. It's the customers that come through that door. It's what provides revenue to the bottom line, and all of that is, so the owners and the customer base and all that is critical to an ongoing concern. You strip all that out of there, you really are not selling anything. And there's no way these guys could have sold anything.
So what happened in this situation? I mean, you obviously had some concerns. They kind of wanted, as you basically said, they wanted to cut and run. What did you do? I mean, do you normally take on a client that has that type of attitude? And,
well, we don't.
You're not going to be around. What do you have? As you said several times there, well, how did you handle this situation?
Okay, so what we normally do is we normally make a recommendation, and that recommendation is rehabilitative in nature. So we recommended to them that they need to have a succession plan in place so that when new owners come in, there's talent across the board in the key management areas that could help support that company. They didn't want to hear that, and they weren't interested in succession planning. They weren't interested in grooming people to take their roles. So, that kind of left us with the idea that maybe they just wanted to cut and run. So
even a business that's doing $28 million in revenue, when you kind of boil it down to what's going to be left after they're gone, there really wasn't much of a business there. I mean, all those customers, as you said, the sales and marketing guy probably had all the relationships, and when he's gone, who knows what's going to happen to those clients, especially if there's a little bit of concentration in those customers.
Well, that's true. I mean, even when you look at strategics, strategic companies or even some private equity groups that are looking at a roll up or something like that, they may provide some talent, but they still want to see that there's sufficient talent that's left with the organization when they take it over. And so this was a real red flag for us, and it just wasn't a fit. We suggested some opportunities for them to take a couple of years to transition the organization so that it would be more appealing to the marketplace.
But it sounds like they weren't interested in doing that.
They had no interest in that, so we just had to part ways and move on. Yeah.
I guess the big takeaway here is if there is not a management hierarchy in place, a management infrastructure to facilitate the succession of management to the new owner, the probability of finding the right buyer that's going to pay the price that the sellers want is probably not very likely. And you would probably spend a lot of work and effort and time and not get a deal done. That was kind of your conclusion, right?
Yeah, sure. And new ownership could bring a CEO in that can provide the rudder, so to speak. But new owners aren't going to want to replace the CFO, the sales and marketing guy, the operations guy, all the other critical pieces, because that's just too many pieces to have to replace.
Yeah, what are they really buying? If there's no one there left,
that's right.
All of the brains of the business that made it a $28 million business goes out the door. What are you really buying?
That's correct.
Well, that's a great takeaway, Gerald. That's kind of a unique story that we haven't really had something that illustrates that principle of management hierarchy so dramatically, is that there was so much concentration in the owners of the business. We often hear one owner having a lot of, being the person that is difficult to replace, but they generally have other people that stay with the company. And in this particular case, that wasn't going to be the situation. Well, that's a great takeaway.
Almost every interview that I've ever been involved with from the buy side, one of the first questions they ask is, how critical is the owner? Does he have any management support left when we take it over? And the answer is no, 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 and no. They will lose interest immediately. So
their answer is going to be no.
Right? No, 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 and no.
And no, yes, no. Well, that's great. That's a great insight. Really approached from a little bit different than some of the other transactional stories we've had here on the podcast. So I appreciate you sharing that, Gerald.
Thanks for listening to the Business Exit Stories podcast. For more information or to reach out to today's guest, visit www.businessexitstories.com for more details. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast from your favorite podcasting platforms. And remember, maximizing business value at the time of exit doesn't happen magically. It takes planning.